right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Happy Hour. Take the Lead Virtual Happy Hour. We're so glad you're here. We have some amazing guests this month, and we have two incredibly important months to celebrate. We have Black History Month. We have Heart Month. We have so much to talk about, and I can't wait to talk about our two truly amazing, accomplished guests this week. I'm Gloria Feldt. I'm co-founder and president of Take the Lead. Take the Lead's URL, in case you want to go take a look, is taketheleadwomen.com. I always have to tell you that, taketheleadwomen.com. Remember why? Because when we started, we didn't have enough money to buy the URL from the dog company that owns Take the Lead as the URL. So taketheleadwomen.com. Don't forget that. Okay, you can go ahead and start tweeting in your questions to @takeleadwomen. Or you can chat them in the chat box. And either way, we will be delighted to take your questions. For either of our guests will be thrilled to take your questions. I know that because I know they're both incredibly fabulous. You can connect with Take the Lead on social media, truly anywhere. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, we're everywhere. So we want to know what you think. We want to keep in touch with you. If you don't already subscribe to our amazing weekly newsletter, Take the Lead This Week, I know you're going to want to get it, because you get in like a 5-minute read, you find out everything that's up to date and current about women in leadership. And our mission is nothing short of preparing, developing, inspiring, and propelling women to take their fair and equal share of leadership positions across every single sector by 2025. So we got a lot of work to do in a short period of time, and we thank you all for being here and being part of this amazing movement to do just exactly that. Okay, so be sure that you stay to the end of our virtual happy hour, because you remember that there is a fabulous gift at the end. Someone will win a mentoring session with me. I get to talk to somebody for an hour. We get to talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you want advice, if you want just to chat, just to talk, just to find out more about Take the Lead or anything else that I can help you with, we will get to have a chat. So be sure and stay with us, and you'll find out who is going to be the lucky winner this program. So do that. What else did I forget to tell you? Oh yes. Also, to take your sister courage, and we love the hashtag sister courage. We really love for you to use that. Hashtag sister courage. Well, one of the things we do to help sister courage become really everywhere is we have our Glass Breakers Take the Lead mentoring platform. I just got matched with a new person this very week. And I haven't yet had a chance to talk with her, but what will happen is, if you sign up, you just go to our website, taketheleadwomen.com, you click on mentor, and you can be a mentor, you can get a mentor, you can be both of the above to each other, and you'll get matched with someone who will share your interests, and you'll tag yourself, and you'll get matched with somebody who shares your interests. So I'm looking forward to meeting my latest person that I've been matched up with, and I know that you will really benefit from it. I think that mentorship is one of the most important things that helps all of us advance in our lives, and so we can never have too many wonderful mentors in our lives. So let me introduce briefly our two guests this evening. And I'm not going to tell you too much, because I want them to tell you much more about them. But I'll first introduce Carol Jenkins. Carol, hi there. So happy to have you here with us this evening. Carol is a much beloved veteran news anchor. She is an Emmy award-winning journalist. She is a very sought-after speaker. She's written, she writes, she was the founding president of the Women's Media Center, and I was privileged to serve on that board when she was president, and she did some amazing things. I hope she'll tell us about things like the Progressive Women's Voices. She is also on the board of AMREF USA, and she has a new television show called Black Lives. So she'll tell us about that. So Carol, welcome. This is going to be really tough to have a Carol and a Cheryl. I am sure to mess up several times in this hour. I can guarantee you that. So we're also thrilled to have Dr. Cheryl Pegus. Cheryl, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You did.
Thank you. Okay. So Dr. Pegus, who wants to be called Cheryl, and I'm going to remember to do that, she is the clinical professor of medicine and population health at the NYU School of Medicine. But that's just the beginning. Let me tell you, this woman has a resume that I could spend the whole hour telling you about. She is also the president of Caluent. She is a director of several different companies, Glytech, Cogentix Medical, and U.S. Acute Care Solutions. She also was formerly the medical director of Pfizer, and she was the chief medical officer of Walgreens, which is really interesting. And I want to talk to you, Cheryl, about the democratization of the availability of sort of basic health care, which is a very big interest of mine. And I want to hear more about what you've been doing. Cheryl has also been she's past president of the American Heart Association because she does have a subspecialty in cardiology, and that's one of her big areas of expertise that she will talk with us about. And when she has a particular interest in addressing gaps in care for across populations that may be underserved, and certainly when it comes to heart health, which we want to talk a little bit about this evening, there are lots of gaps when it comes to women and heart health. So Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you.
And let me start with you, Cheryl.
Sure.
How did you get to be you?
Wow.
What's your path?
So we're going to go way back, everyone. So when I was younger, I was actually 12 years old, and my grandfather passed away, and he probably had diabetes, and none of us knew. He also had really poor access to care. Actually, during that time, we took care of him at home. He never went to a physician. And I remember being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I'm going to be a doctor. And it wasn't just my grandfather. It was other family members, other people I knew, just didn't have good quality health care. And I emigrated to the United States. I'm originally from Trinidad. And I started on my journey to become a doctor. And along the way, decided that I would specialize in cardiology. Something changed. In 1990, a study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it said, and it has stuck with me throughout my career, and I come back to it every couple of years, it said that a man living in Harlem had less of a chance of living to 40 than a man living in Bangladesh. Ooh. And at that time, Bangladesh had the lowest income in the world, according to the World Bank. So just hear that statement. A man living in Harlem has less of a chance of making it to 40 years old than a man living in Bangladesh. And it really changed my career. I had originally thought, I'm going to set up my shingle. I'm going to have a practice. Patients are going to come to see me. This is going to be great. And it made me think of how can I get involved in all aspects of healthcare? So you want to talk about retail health later. You now see some of why that's occurred for me. And I'm really focused on how do you deliver quality, cost-effective care to everyone. I utilize a lot of technology and data analytics and personalizing healthcare to people based on where they are and how they want to manage their health. The only other thing that I focus on a lot is that healthcare is a 50-50 partnership. So it's 50% about the patients, but the other 50%, it's about the doctors, the nurse practitioners, the pharmacists. How do you access insurance? And so my focus on healthcare is how do I bring all of the pieces together and help to deliver healthcare by making sure I'm engaged and knowledgeable in those components.
Well, we're very fortunate that you have taken that path, and thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
I'm waiting for my doctor. Right away.
Right now, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Carol, tell us about your story. I think one of the interesting things to me is that your family history is so deep in American history. And that's why I wanted you to be on this program for Black History Month. And will you share some of that? And how did you get to be you? And what does that history tell
Well,
you?
sure, a little bit. It's a long story. It gets longer every year, as you can well imagine.
Yeah, I get that.
But I spent the first 3 years of my life on a farm in Lowndes County, Alabama. This is 1940s. You know, I was one of those kids who had no shoes, didn't have the notion of it. You know, he had no indoor plumbing, but we had a strong matriarchal streak running through my family. My grandmother had 15 children. One of them was my mother.
Wow.
There were 9 girls and 6 boys. So there was, we call it perhaps the first feminist family. All of the girls went to college and the boys stayed on the farm. And so we had 9 mostly teachers who went to teachers college, and you know, during that time, and
that's what we did. Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. As my mother, and we had not only the grandmothers, but my Aunt Minnie, who supported almost all of us. I have 40 first cousins. First, she put all of her sisters through college, then helped with that, and then all of their children helped them in some way. She had happened to marry and helped build an empire with a man by the name of A.G. Gaston, who was one of the country's first Black multimillionaires in Birmingham, with motel and insurance and banking and construction. In the end, you know, quite a few businesses. I'm happy to report that President Obama, in one of his last acts as his proclamation, created the Birmingham Civil Rights Park. It's a monument run by park rangers now in Birmingham, focused on civil rights, and it is the A.G. Gaston Motel, my uncle's hotel, being restored, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and the 16th Street Baptist Church, where, you know, those 4 young girls lost their lives.
It gives me chills. All of this just gives me chills.
So that is being, you know, the website is up now, and it's so wonderful just to see, you know, the park rangers, and they say, come to Birmingham and, you know, and learn about your history. And that's really what we have there. It's not just Black history, it's American
history. Yes.
And, you know, and the other piece is that farm that I spent the first 3 years of my life on was one of the sleepover spots on the march from Selma to Montgomery. When John Lewis infamously was beaten. So we were the third stop, the third night, and we still own the farm. I have cousins and an aunt who was there then, who's still on the farm. So that's a piece of the American history that, you know, that we're a part of, from that deep-seated segregationist, poor part of this country in the 1940s through, you know, through this time where we've made a great deal of progress, but as we see every day, having to get into a battle of some sort or another.
So much, so much. So how did you get from barefoot on the farm to this amazing, well-known journalist and news anchor in New York?
Well, that was a huge leap, because we were all, I mean, I happened to become a television discussant, but one of my cousins is now a judge in Birmingham. She was one of those 9 Black women judges elected on election day, when we had many things not to be happy about, but you know, but in Birmingham we had 9 women who became judges, and they're all doctors and lawyers and business people. So I mean, it was what we say in our family, and I guess we shouldn't be bragging, it's not bragging, but it's an instance of pride, is that we didn't lose anybody. We haven't lost anybody along the way. So everybody went to college, everybody became, I think it was out of fear, first of all, you know, of our matriarchal influence, that we had to do as well as we could. And all of the women were expected to work. There was no such thing as you're a woman and you can afford to not work as hard or carve out your career. So my mother and father moved to New York. So I spent the rest of my growing up in New York.
I see.
And, you know, went off to college and, you know, decided on broadcasting for a career, and was fortunate enough to spend a huge chunk of time, about 30 years doing that. So
I didn't want to say how many decades. The bio that I had said
maybe I could say
a long history, and I just, you know, I've gotten that way with my own bio. I'm like, no, please don't say how many decades. Just say decades. Just say decades.
A very long time.
A very long time. A very long and very very stellar time. So, but you haven't stopped, right? What are you doing now?
Yeah, well, I've had those so-called retirements, you've been through a couple of them with me. I said, I'm retired. And then I would take maybe 6 months and then find myself doing something else. So right now I'm hosting a show for CUNY TV called Black America. And we've just done a 1-hour special on the new Black Museum in Washington, D.C. It's the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So they have to collapse that in some way. And the 1-hour special has been picked up by PBS, so it's airing on February 16th, 10:30 on WNET here in New York. So, so still working.
Still working. Well, this is one really important message I think we should give to the younger women and men too, who may be participating this evening.
Right.
Which is that you never know what opportunities life is going to hold. Definitely. And just when you think you're done, you're probably just starting out again.
That's right. If we have time.
So don't fret. Don't fret. Yeah. If something doesn't feel like it's going well in your life, or you're not happy with your profession or whatever, don't worry about it.
That's right.
You'll be able to do something else. You've got these opportunities. So Cheryl, sort of in that vein, and looping back to the importance of women and heart health.
Definitely.
We know that stress is one of the really big issues, really big correlators with issues around heart health, and that women particularly may tend not to pay attention to those things. We're not here to give medical advice, but I do think it's important to talk about why this whole movement for Go Red, why we're talking so much about women and heart health, and why we have a whole month dedicated to it. I mean, what's the big deal?
Yeah, so, I think what's really important here, and I love the tone of talking about families and the roles of women in families. For almost every family, it's actually the woman who's taking care of not just their health. Obviously, they tend to have their health be at the bottom, but they take care of the health of the family. So a healthy woman in a family leads to a healthy family. The first thing that I want to mention, because I think people may know it, but they forget it, heart disease is the #1 cause of death for women. It's not breast cancer, it's not lung cancer, it's heart disease, 1 in 3 women. And if you look today at women and heart disease, more women have died from heart disease than men. And I think, a lot of women themselves think about men when they think of heart disease, but it's actually impacting women much more. And so there are a lot of different risk factors, and I'm going to link 2 that for me are really, really important. They link to stress, but the first is smoking. If there's one thing you leave tonight with, and if you think you're smoking because it helps you relieve stress, smoking is the #1 cause of heart disease that people need to get rid of, because it not only impacts heart disease, it also causes all of those other cancers as well. If you eliminated smoking, you could really have a huge impact on your health. It's something that you should talk to your doctor about. Don't think it's something you go alone. There are medications, there are programs. Your insurance companies fund these. You should get help associated with that. The second thing that I think even doctors don't spend enough time talking to women about, it's controlling their blood pressure. Again, blood pressure is probably a measure of stress, but once you've been told you have high blood pressure, and everyone, I want you to remember this, it's 120/80. If it's higher than 120/80, there's a problem. There is a problem. And
what do those 2 numbers mean? I'm telling you, I always forget. And when my doctor is telling me what mine, I'm going, But
So the top number is your systolic blood pressure. And so with me, it's the higher component of this. And the bottom number is your diastolic blood pressure. It's when we're getting to where we're not hearing your blood pumping as much. So the top number is always higher than the lower number. 120/80 is the cutoff. And here's part of the problem with blood pressure. You don't feel anything. You can have high blood pressure. You never know you have it. And so a lot of people, including doctors, will treat high blood pressure as, oh, it's something else we should take care of. High blood pressure is the #1 cause of heart failure, because if your blood keeps pumping really hard through your heart, after a while, your heart gets tired and it leads to heart failure. And so I tell everyone, if someone told you, your doctor told you you had high blood pressure and they gave you medications, take it every day. If you get up one day and you have a headache and you're like, oh, today I should take my blood pressure. Actually, no, you should have been taking it every day. If you get up and you're feeling well, still take your blood pressure. If you feel that, this medication isn't working for me, say something to your doctor. There are about 100 different blood pressure medications. It is definitely an opportunity to have a conversation.
well, if I may, Cheryl, there's a question here that's just for you.
Sure.
Okay. This is perfect. Sunny from Austin wants to know, what can the average person do to help support the message of heart health, especially for women in our communities?
What a great question. And so the first thing I'd like everyone to know, the American Heart Association has a website. It's called goredforwomen.org. There's a lot of information there. And the first thing that you can do to help people in your community is let them know what the risk factors are for heart disease. And so I've already mentioned two. There'll be a quiz at the end. One's smoking, and the other is high blood pressure. So two things to remember that you can control. But I do think what women can do for other women is ask them, have you seen your doctor? By the way, I made my appointment. Here are the appointments for myself, my own wellness checkups that I'm going to do this year. When are you scheduling yours? It is the beginning of having that relationship. The other thing that women can do for each other is helping each other when they learn something new. So, you mentioned stress, and I just want to spend some time on that, because what I will say to everyone is we still don't know a lot about how stress impacts health. We've really only in the last couple of years begun to put real money, NIH-funded clinical trials to determine how stress is impacting heart disease, but even pregnancy. It has an impact. We know it has an impact. We just don't know all of the biochemical steps. The first thing that you should think about when you think about, gosh, this is really stressful for me, is to remember, do you have a network of people you can talk to? Talking about issues help. Talking with trusted friends, colleagues, and your physicians, really, really important. I mentioned this earlier before the call started. So I'm a firm believer in taking 5 minutes at the beginning of the day and reminding yourself of what you're thankful for. By the way, there have been a lot of great cardiac studies that have shown that meditation and yoga can improve heart disease. It's 5 minutes, it's quiet time. You get up and you say, I'm thankful for one, thankful for being alive. 2, I'm thankful that someone hugged me this morning. It could be anything. Spread some thanks for yourself before going out into the world. It really gets you started in a positive place. And being positive has an impact on your health.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If I may, Gloria,
please.
She didn't mention the glass of wine. Too.
Well, and particularly during a virtual happy hour, when we want everybody to take their cocktail or their mocktail or their glass of wine or whatever it is that they like, and be enjoying it while we're talking.
Exactly. But I also wanted to know, when I left broadcasting, because I for many years was a reporter for NBC News in New York here, Channel 4. And one of the last stories that I did at the maybe 1997, 1998 was about women and heart disease. what has changed in that amount of time? It was then the big story. It's the #1 killer of women, and it still seems to be the big story. What have you discovered? What have we learned in that amount of time, in a 15-year span, so to speak?
So great question. So there are a couple of things to know. Though heart disease remains the #1 killer of women and of men, the numbers have actually come down. So over the last 15 years, we've actually improved treatment of heart disease. We've improved awareness. So today, if you go out and you ask about heart disease, many women now know that they're at risk for heart disease. So in 15 years, we've learned that. The other thing is 15 years ago, we talked a lot, and actually I was trained on this, that as women aged, they should take hormone replacement therapy treatments. We actually learned a lot about the impact that those can have on women with risk factors for heart disease. So for a woman, if you're perimenopausal or you're postmenopausal, and you're thinking, gosh, I'd really like to treat these hot flashes, definitely have a conversation with your physician about any risk factors that you may have. Diabetes, high blood pressure, do you smoke? These are things that you should definitely be talking about. So we've learned a lot about some things that we should manage better. The other things that we've learned is that women are different from men. And so, you know, people would make cardiac catheterization is a procedure that we do to open an artery in your heart when it's blocked. So when you're having a heart attack, it means that blood isn't flowing to your heart. And we would normally say cardiac catheterization, everyone should get this. It turns out women's vessels are a different size. They need different treatments for it. And so we've learned actually a lot in the science. What we now need to do is to move from we're now aware to now we're actively treating, and that things like stress, we're now actively studying so we can come back and move forward. And I always tell people, you know, we started off our conversation this way, it's better than it was, but we've still got a long way to go. What's great about this is the American Heart Association, for the first time ever, is specifically focused on heart disease in women and how pregnancy may affect heart disease, how stress management may affect heart disease, how meditation may affect heart disease. So things that we, you know, before we would think of, gosh, we've got to do surgery, gosh, we've got to take a pill. How does your lifestyle impact your health? And we're looking into that a lot more. So I would tell women that's changed. And the last thing that I would say that's really changed, there are more female cardiologists.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. All right. Okay. We're on the same page with that for sure. Absolutely. And it's another example of why it's important for women to take their fair and equal share of leadership in every single sector.
Definitely.
Because it really is true. I mean, these things that you're talking about, if you don't have a woman's lens on it, you don't have a woman's experience in it, you're missing half of the population. You're missing half of the ability to actually be inclined to think about some of those variables that might make the difference. So thank you so much for that. Just in case anybody just joined us, welcome to Take the Lead's virtual happy hour. And I'm having the great honor and pleasure of talking with Carol Jenkins and Cheryl Pegus this evening about Black History Month and Heart Month. And we have a question from Kirsten in Rhode Island that's just for you, Carol. It's perfect, just for you. Okay. We have some, I'm telling you, we have some fantastic people who join us every month, and we always have new people every month too, but it's wonderful, and we really appreciate them and their interest in these topics. So just know that you're doing really good for the world here. So this question from Kirsten is, excuse me, how can women's leadership and philanthropy play a key role in advancing quality journalism? You might know a thing or two about that.
And don't we need it now, right?
Yes, we do. No alternative facts, right?
Precisely, yeah. So I think this whole election cycle, journalists and media came under severe criticism, and I must say that some of it was warranted. We failed in many significant ways to ask and get answers to, even if we asked them and the questions weren't answered. We quite didn't have the skills to nail it down, which we now discover is absolutely essential. I think we had all gotten into a state of trust, of just swimming along, that that we were in the habitual, you ask a question, you get an answer, you can count on it being truthful most of the time, and that was pretty good. That was enough, and now we know that the implications for not doing serious journalism, not having women engaged in and people of color and people with disabilities engaged in every single aspect of the business of media, meant that we were not doing our job. We were not vigilant enough. We didn't know enough. We didn't have contacts enough. We fell drastically short this time around. So I see us really needing to rework that whole thing. Now, we know that women, you and I know this, Gloria, that there are women who have a lot of money. But what we haven't been able to do is shake it loose. But to put it another way, is that women are still not giving at the levels that they could, they can, to other women and to organizations that are helping people. So we know that the philanthropists are waking up to that. We've got the Nobel Foundation, we have the Gates Foundation. They are giving huge sums of money, trying to cure some of the biggest ills that we have. But I think a huge chunk of that needs to go to our journalism schools, our media retraining, our enhancing our creating new publications, whether they be online or broadcast, so that we are able to understand what the truth is.
Well, I want to ask you this question, because I know from the data that I've gotten from the Women's Media Center that although women are the majority now of journalism school graduates, they're kind of stuck at mid-level for the most part in their careers. That's what tends to happen. And that when you get to the top, at the top of media companies, it's still under 5% female in terms of the people who are really calling the shots.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that and what you think it will take for women to move on, and how would you inspire women? Because I think it's not that women don't have the capability. I think it's not that I don't even think that it's not that opportunities are not there. I think it really comes down to whether women see themselves in those roles, whether they are aware of the capabilities they have confidence, they have the power that they have, because they have the preponderance of the college degrees. They have so much coming in. What happens along the way, and what do we need to do to fix that?
Yeah. Well, remember the figure we used to use was 3%, right?
Yes.
When we stood at the Women's Media Center, you and I were there together with that. So if we can now say comfortably 5%, that's the incremental progress that's been made at this time. Well, there's so many things. Our friend Tiffany Dufu has a new book out called Drop the Ball. And it's that women still are having to do everything, of raise their families and try to succeed in work. And I think that despite the fact that so many people said you could have it all, we know that it's extremely, getting back to Dr. Cheryl, extremely stressful, to try to raise your family, even if you have a partner, and perform at work. And what happens to a lot of women is that at a certain point, they do bail out because the stress is too much and their children are suffering, especially if they can't, have, 24-hour babysitters, which is the way so many families of wealth operate. That's how women can succeed. But I think that I don't believe it's so much that we are not working hard enough. I think it is that the structures, the systemic bias against women's capabilities is still in effect, and I think that somehow that has to be cracked open. I know that Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook they just enhanced their bereavement, to 20 days, I think, which is a huge step, and increase the paid sick leave. I mean, those kinds of things have to be in place, and I think that that we need to look at that more than we do now.
They're important for men and women, both. I'm sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, no, I want to talk about that because it's a really important piece. I do think so. By the way, for physicians in 1981, only 12% women. It's now 31%. That is a 500% increase compared to men. By the way, in that time frame, it's only increased 50%. There are more women. However, there's this huge salary differential still, just published last year. And so there are a lot of different components. And the things that I try to focus on is, you know, what are the things, once you've checked a box that you can enter the door because you have the credentials, what are the things that are really necessary to make it into the highest echelon of an organization? And they are the things like networking. They're the things like mentoring. And so I will tell you, and I tell this to all women, you know, none of us can do this alone as we progress through our career. I've always had mentors. And unfortunately, when you're becoming a chief medical officer of a multinational company, there aren't a lot of other women that you can go to find someone who can advise you, to tell you what to do or what to ask. And so I've had a lot of mentors who are men, and I've had a lot of mentors who are women. And the first thing I tell all women, if you've got the skill set and you're interested, ask someone to be your mentor.
Exactly.
Ask them, how did you get it? Because I will tell you today, it doesn't matter where I go. If I've met someone, I'll get 5 emails from all of the men I've met. I might get 1 email from a woman. It's how it works. We have to help each other. So that's the first thing I would tell
Sister
people.
courage. Remember that hashtag,
you really,
Sister
really,
courage.
You've got to ask, and you've got to say, how did you do it? There's no pride in it. We've all worked in trying to get help. The second thing that I would say is make sure that you know the data. So some of the things that are really clear in a lot of areas now that we didn't have before is we can tell how much the salary is within your corporation.
Yes.
And so, you know, I tell people, arm yourself with the data, arm yourself with the variables of what are the things that are the same, what are the things that are different, and how do we close that? And so for women in medicine in particular, the things that we know that women aren't applying for grants, research grants, or writing enough. And by the way, it doesn't just mean writing a scientific journal. It's doing one of these talks. It's writing something in another publication. It's calling Carol Jenkins and saying, hey, can I come on your show? It's really being able
You'll be there soon. I can guarantee you that.
It's really having a national presence. And my experience is that a lot of women don't know these things matter. You know, they finish work and they go home. You can be home and you could have written your blog. You can take 5 blogs and turn it into an article. More than any time today, those things can happen. If you're saying, you know, I've got a lot of responsibilities, pick 4 events for the year and say, I'm going to make sure I have coverage and attend those 4 events to network. The same way we plan for our families, for our children to get their immunizations, we'll plan how we're doing plan your career. It's how everyone does it. They're doing it and they've got a secret sauce. The secret sauce is managing it and planning it and raising your hand for help. I am a walking billboard for how that occurs.
Well, I'm signing you up to be a Take the Lead Leadership Ambassador as of this minute, because you're singing our song here. You're totally singing our song.
Yes, women have to do that, and the systems have to be changed. So that
yes, exactly. Yes, yeah.
We'll never break through as it is now. It's just.
I agree.
Well, speaking of breakthroughs, how did you know I was going to ask you a question about how you broke through, Carol? Because yes, I want to know how you broke through in journalism at a time when it probably wasn't easy, either as a woman or as a Black person. How did you break through?
Actually, quite the opposite. I was one of the lucky ones in the sense of, when I started in the business, there were virtually no women or people of color. And the government essentially said, I'm sorry, you have to do something about that. And so women and people of color were called window dressing on the set. And so there was a mandate that said, we're talking about the early 70s now, right? lifetime ago. So you have to find them from somewhere. And so at that point, the journalism schools were not the hot ticket that they are now or had been through this last flush. Nobody knew about journalism schools. So most of us came into the business from different careers. They were in nursing and, you know, all kinds of things. I was fortunate enough to go back to school and get some journalism courses before I started as a secretary at CBS. And that's with my master's degree now. You know, my parents were furious, as well they should have been. But I said, no, this is the way you do it now. You know, so I started as a secretary. My first job was running scripts through the halls of CBS and delivering them to the studio for my boss, my male boss, who was going to sit down in his jacket and read it. And then I started at a small station. And I remember my boss telling me explicitly, he says, you know, Carol, you're taking a big chance. You have a good secretarial job here and you're going to throw it all away.
Oh my gosh.
For a reporter. And I said, yes, I have to go, you know, but will you give me my job back? You know, and he says, no, this is it. So I went off at any rate, but it was a tiny station. And again, it was building. And so I started out as a researcher. It was a show that hadn't gone on the air yet. This is what people do out of town. I did it in New York, but a different world. And by the time the show went on the air, I was a co-anchor just by sheer dint of luck. And having been able to
No. I always have to tell women, do not ever attribute your success to luck.
It was
did it because you were smart and skilled and you were prepared. You had your education, right?
Well, that's true. I did have my master's degree. My mother was very pleased that I was actually going to be doing something. And so then broke in that way and had a lot of learning to do, and found a home. I'd always wanted to work for NBC, and I started there with a 3-week contract, and wound up staying there for 25 years. So, but even in the beginning, as we well know, these stories of what stories did you get to cover? The flower show, and only increasingly did they. I think when they tried to get some of us to shake some of us out of the business, they would send us to the murder scene, you know. And if we could handle the body, you know, then we got a longer contract. But that was it. You would go into a place and there were, well, anyway, you know, that's what news was and still is to this day. A lot of it. But breaking through the political news was the real hardship, because a lot of the people who were ahead of me in that pipeline were entrenched, had been doing it for many years. And so bit by bit, you'd get a small story here or there. And then ultimately I got to go to the conventions to cover the presidential conventions. But it was tough. But, you know, the news business is tough on everybody. I would never say that some of the men that I knew who were struggling in that didn't have just awful times as well. So
we're big on giving people concrete tips here at Take the Lead. And I think I just heard you give several, which is don't look an opportunity, you know, don't miss an opportunity to say yes to doing something that, even if it might not be exactly what you thought you wanted to do, or you maybe not what you see yourself doing in 10 or 15 years, give it a try and start small. Sometimes you have to start small and show your creds. You have to develop your creds.
No, and that's it's that key of knowing or thinking or feeling, that sense that it will turn out, it will lead to something better. And no matter what you learn as a journalist comes in handy. Right. You use it ultimately in your work. But, you know, I had to do everything. I worked weekends. I would take my daughter to work and she would sit under the anchor desk, you know, and my mother would call and say, I can see Elizabeth's puffs, you know, tell her to scoot down more. And, you know, I remember the time when I was sent out on there was a suspicious car in a garage. And so I had her with me, and I was carrying her in my arm. Fortunately, she was still, you know, sort of sleepy, and they popped the trunk. And of course, that's where the bodies were, you know. And so,
oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Whoa.
true working mom. And then as the lights were flashing, Elizabeth woke up and said, "Mommy, are we at the circus? Or are we at the..." I don't think she's too damaged by it, but she
Apparently not.
So
Kids are pretty resilient.
are.
You know, they're
They
very
are.
resilient. So I have one more question for you before I get back to Cheryl and healthcare, Carol, because I want to stay with the idea of Black History Month for just a minute here, and it really is about where are we now, and where do you see Black history going? How are we? What history do we need to make today?
we need to be able, quite frankly, to get up and go about our daily lives without feeling overwhelmed and frightened, because these times have been very, very scary to a lot of people. My nephew called me up in the middle of the night one night and said, "I feel nervous. I can't sleep. I don't know what's going to happen. Are we safe? And then I just saw in the news today where some guy who's selling bunkers, is doing a booming business because people think that, who knows what can happen." So I think that as people generally, we have to understand the uncertainty of where we are now and the things that could happen. And the fact that many people would suggest that our time is, quote, over. That's what we hear from a lot of people saying, "Oh, you guys, you had it easy for a while. There were all those laws that were amendments and whatever that were passed, and forget that." So where does that bring us? And I think that the first thing, as Cheryl can tell us, is self-care, is that we really, really are in danger of becoming unhealthy, unwell, physically and emotionally, by what we have to digest every day in terms of negativity. And I just think that we have to change our laws. That you and I work for the ERA Coalition, where we want to change the Constitution. So many of the things that we've worked on for so many years haven't changed, because at the core of our country is a inequality. And that is that women and people of color and disabled people, people of different faiths, were not built into that system. That was the Constitution that was written for wealthy, white, slave-owning men.
Right.
Slave-owning men. And so what we have to do is to get back to that core of making sure that we have a working Constitution that includes us all. And so that's where I'm putting my energies, into making sure that as a part of that, people are able to vote and vote confidently, that they are able to run for office and run confidently, women and people of color, and the disabled. I mean, we have so many groups that have been excluded. I saw this headline once where somebody was saying, I was always a supporter of the disenfranchised, but I never expected to be one myself.
Oh.
And so
oh my goodness.
And so many of us are looking up and realizing, wait a minute, I'm not seriously counted in this country. And so we have to work hard to change the Constitution, for one thing, to make sure that we are included.
Absolutely. I think many people don't know that women are not included in the Constitution. So we have a lot of teaching to do. So I have a question for you, Cheryl, from Tony in California.
Oh.
She wants to know, she says, this is a somewhat scary time in healthcare for women. Besides taking better care of ourselves, how can women make a difference in drawing attention and advocating our health issues?
Great question. So there are a couple of things that I'm thinking that has led to that. And so many people talk about the Affordable Care Act and the different wellness provisions that have been placed in that. And so you get a wellness visit every year, particularly for a woman. You have mammograms that are covered. If you have a baby, you're no longer discharged from the hospital the same day. So I think for women, there are some aspects of this that are very specific to the types of care that we need, that are specific to our bodies. And so I started out by saying that every woman should be aware of the wellness checks that they should have this year. And for many people, even though you know that there may be changes coming to the Affordable Care Act, in 2017, you actually still have all the access you've always had. And so a lot of people are waiting on the sidelines. You shouldn't be. You should be able to get the care that you're entitled to based on what you got last year or the year before. Nothing's changed yet. So please, for everyone, if you need to refill your prescriptions, go do that. If you need to make your appointment to see your physician, go do that. You still have access to good care. Something that Carol said that I just want to reinforce. We're having more conversations about these topics than we've ever had before. The information is available, particularly about what access to healthcare means and how it can be changed pretty dramatically. And so voting, making sure that your voice is heard as it relates to healthcare is really important. When your representatives come home, ask them. Email them. I've mentioned the American Heart Association. We have something called You're the Cure. I reach out in my community every week by email, and I get responded to, and everyone can. And so I do think more than ever, making sure that you're speaking up for what you need in healthcare, because as I've just mentioned, none of us are alone in this. If you think it's you, there's another 100,000 who have the same issue. So speaking out about it and advocating is definitely something to do. But do not think that you should be holding out on healthcare. You have access, you should be using it. And you should be asking the questions of your physicians as well. I mentioned my interest in really wanting to not just help a patient treat their disease, but understanding their access, understanding if they can pay for it. Physicians today are able to handle those questions. Ask them, don't think, gosh, I've got to go find a social worker. I've got to go. Ask your doctor when you're there. It's a prime opportunity to do that. The other thing that I would say when we talk about women's health is that women many times are afraid to ask their doctor for things that may be bothering them. They feel that, maybe this isn't serious. So here's my plea. If you have what you think is heartburn, by the way, in women, that could be a sign, an early sign of having a heart attack. Please speak to someone, ask them. Learn the signs of a stroke. Yes, it's numbness. It may be a severe headache. It may be that your speech is slurred. And call 911. It's not, I'm going to go take a nap, and then later, if I'm still not feeling well, then I'll ask someone. And so I think I'd really like people to learn the symptoms of a heart attack and of a stroke and continue to get care. And if you feel as if, gosh, I'm not sure what to do about this, I'm not sure who to ask. I know everyone says you should never, ever go to an emergency room. Well, there are other options. You can go to a retail health clinic that's set up in pharmacies across this country. There are nurse practitioners there who can answer your questions and who can treat you. You can talk to a pharmacist. One of the most underutilized aspects of healthcare are pharmacies. And by the way, pharmacies are open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day in every community. Even in underserved communities, there's a pharmacy. And so having access and asking a question, you've nothing to be embarrassed about. Think about the fact that you may never see them again and ask your question and get help. And so I do think we've got to bring people into realizing all of these are different touch points. It's not waiting until an emergency. And so for the person asking in California, it's knowing what exists in your community. Where's your local pharmacy? Do you know? Do they have a retail clinic? Do you know what medications you're on and when your next refill is? Have you found out when you've scheduled for your wellness visit? Call and make it. I make mine a year in advance. I make my mammography appointment, and the beginning of the year, I schedule everything. It's off my to-do list.
Okay, so I was going to flippantly say, when you were saying ask your doctor, I was going to flippantly say something about how we now know doctors are not gods, right? We were afraid to talk to our doctors because we had this sort of doctor as God thing.
Exactly.
But I think I've decided you must be a goddess. So that's just, that's what I'm taking away from this.
When Carol was speaking earlier, and because I think a lot of people, wonder how do these things happen? In 1995, I was the first Black cardiologist female to graduate from Cornell.
Ooh.
1995. And so when people think how far we've come, 1995 to today, I mean, for crying out loud,
Yeah.
we've come a really long way.
We've come a long way.
And so there's a lot of good going on. And my responsibility is to bring along the next and the next. And so I do think if we all recognize our responsibilities to each other in our communities, particularly if you're doing what you love to do. And if for me, I love healthcare. My goodness, I couldn't get up and do anything else. I can find an aspect of healthcare to address on any given day. And I'm talking with you today because I think for a lot of women, particularly if there are young women out there, all of you, go become a doctor. We need you. Oh, Carol, I just stole every journalism student you ever were going to have. They're all becoming doctors.
Oh my goodness.
We'll share them. I was wondering if
this
at
is
a certain point the medical field was a very well-paying one. I mean, is it still? Is there still that incentive?
So it is. So I think, for women in particular, so I tell people the best career for a woman is becoming a physician. Look, I could take 2 years off, go home and take care of my children, and I can come back to practice. I will have a job. I have a degree that allows me to do that. If I decide what I'd really like to do is focus on research, I can do research. If I feel what I'd really like to understand is health insurance, I can do health insurance. I mean, I could go on and on. If I'd like to start my own company, build it, sell it, go back to seeing patients the next year. And it's one of those careers that doesn't have ageism. I will be practicing until I'm 80, period.
Yes.
Because at 80 is when I'm going to start my dancing career. But that's what I'm going to be doing.
Okay, all right.
Gloria and I are going to do that next.
Right. So as much as I hate to start drawing this amazing conversation to a close, I'm afraid we are getting close to the end of our hour, and I'm just, we could go on for such a long time. And Cheryl, you have actually already answered the last question. You just gave so many tips. We always want people to leave with some specific concrete tips and tools. Thank you. You have just done that. Carol, I want to ask you, we talked a little bit about some tips that you gave earlier about take what's in front of you, make something out of it. Don't be afraid to build your credibility in smaller places and keep building it up. But I just want to give you a moment to see if you have any additional tools or tips that you would like to give to our listeners today.
Well, what I see is that the world is speeding up in terms of changes, technology and inventions, and the opportunity to be an entrepreneur. I think that a lot of us have gotten stuck in, in positions and thinking that was valid maybe 10 years ago, but not so valid now. I mean, it's changing all the time. And I think that really is the task before us, is to keep up with the world as it is moving so quickly. I just had meetings this week with people who have these ideas, and you say, this is like, next century stuff, And the person is saying, no, this is like right now, everything you're doing is passé, they're going to be closing all of those shops immediately. So I think that is part of our daily task, is to be observant in the world, to see how the world is changing. My uncle, who became this fabulous multimillionaire with, 10, 15 businesses, had the one principle, it's find a need and fill it, and what?
Good tip. Great tip. Yes. That's a great one.
And a young man who had my uncle as his hero, he's like 30 years old now, did that. And he's also a multimillionaire. Not that money is
why didn't somebody tell me that a long time ago? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
I have the last question for both of you, and then I'm going to announce our lucky winner. And then I'm going to announce next month's virtual happy hour, which is going to be very cool too. So the last question is, what's your go-to song, poem, or saying? What is it that you go to? What do you rely on to keep you going?
didn't know that I had one, but my granddaughter, who is 7, gave me one today as I was walking her to the school bus. She said, I have a magnet on my locker at school. I was saying, I love you, love you, love you. You know what grandmothers do. You're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. She says, yes, what my magnet says is that you are braver than you know, you are stronger than you think, and you are more loved than ever.
Oh.
So that's my saying of today.
That's a great one. Thank you. Cheryl, what's your go-to?
So this is in my office at home. It's in my office at work. And it has 4 things on it. The first is assume positive intent. That, when you're going out to do something, no one else really cares about you. You've got to focus on, here's how this helps me. The second thing that we always say, deliver bad news early and personally. If you've got something, come on in and let me know. Don't let me walk into a meeting and have my boss say, oh, by the way, this happened, and me go, what? Deliver it early and personally. And the third that I always say, and I know it's one that people are going to say, yes, I like data and accountability, appreciate effort, but reward results. And it really, really, for me, those are my 3. It's how I manage my teams. It's like everyone gets up every day wanting to do their best. I want to approach everyone that way, but we've all got to close on the things that we're responsible for.
Fabulous tips, fabulous advice. I know everyone watching this Take the Lead virtual happy hour is benefiting from what the 2 of you have had to say. Carol Jenkins, thank you so much. Cheryl Pegus, thank you so much. Congratulations to our lucky winner of the Hour of Mentoring from yours truly, Cami Obasola. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She's joining us from Atlanta, Georgia. So Cami, look out for an email. You'll be getting an email that will find out more about you, and we'll be scheduling that hour. And I really look forward to getting to talk with you. Next month, just serendipitously, it turns out that our virtual happy hour, which is always the 2nd Wednesday of the month and always at 6:30 Eastern Time, happens to fall on March 8th. And guess what day that is? International Women's Day. So because I happen to be speaking in Houston at Her World 17, which is a huge conference for women in the energy industry that's put on by a great organization called Pink Petro, whose mission is to get more women into leadership in the energy industry. I will be there speaking, so I'm going to do the virtual happy hour from Houston, from Her World and Pink Petro's wonderful conference. I will have as my guests the founder of Pink Petro, Katie Maynard, and I will also, you heard this first here, have our first male guest.
Very
Haven't done that before, but so, I think International Women's Day is a good day to make sure we're getting the male half of the world involved in women's equality and women's leadership parity. And finally, we will be announcing a really exciting new partnership. So you're going to want to be there. Put it on your calendar, March 8th, 6:30 Eastern Time, virtual happy hour. This has been Take the Lead's virtual happy hour of the month. And thank you again, ladies. You have been absolutely fabulous.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Same to everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.